Well, hello. Thank you for joining me for another time of Bible study. We continue today in our series of lessons on the book of Genesis. Today we're up to chapter 14, and I have to apologize before we get started. I'll probably mess up some of these names because, again, chapter 14 includes some pretty tough names of people and kings that lived during this era. So forgive me ahead of time. Let's start out with verses 1 through 4. It says, "At this time, Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedar Laomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim, went to war against Bera, son of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All these latter kings joined forces in the valley of Siddim, the Salt Sea. For 12 years they had been subject to Kedar Laomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. Again, sorry about those names. But these kings certainly had a successful invasion, but it only lasted for a time, 12 years to be exact. Their subjects had had enough of their rule. They rebelled against their captors. Well, they couldn't have that, so the kings who had dominated this area, who had invaded this area, returned to set this rebellion straight, to take care of these rebels. So then we come to verses 5 through 10. It says, "In the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the kings allied with him went out and defeated the Rephaites in Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzites in Ham, the Emites in Shava Carithium, and the Horites in the hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran near the desert. Then they turned back and went to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and they conquered the whole territory of the Amalekites, as well as the Amorites who were living in Hazazon Tamar. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, marched out and drew up their battle lines in the valley of Siddim against Kedar Laomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of tar pits, and when the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some of the men fell into them, and the rest fled to the hills." Well, the rebellion didn't really go as planned. Even though the 4 rebel kings had gathered together, strategized, and carefully laid out their plans, they were unsuccessful against the 5 kings, the 5 invader kings and their forces. The rebel forces lost. The kings who had dominated the area for over 12 years now came back into this Jordan Valley and soundly defeated the rebellion. And it seems that they took even more of the territory for themselves. There's a special note here of the valley of Siddim. It seems like rather an unhospitable place to fight a battle. It's apparently riddled with tar pits. Some of the rebel forces, fleeing their enemies, fell into these tar pits and perished. The rest of them fled to the hills to escape the onslaught. Verses 11 and 12 says, "The 4 kings seized all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food. Then they went away. They also carried off Abram's nephew Lot and his possessions, since he was living in Sodom." So the last we met he was pitching his tent near Sodom. Now he's living in Sodom. And as the kings swept through the cities, they also took people and their possessions with them. Their booty included some captives, and this one captive in particular was Lot, Abraham's nephew. The last time we heard about Lot, he was camped near the city. And again, I'm guessing he regretted his choice of moving into the city now. And it's curious that he chose to camp out near the city and then move into the city, because apparently he was troubled by its evil, its sin, its degradation. And we, again, have to wonder why. Verses 13 and 14 says, "One who had escaped came and reported this to Abram the Hebrew. Now Abram was living near the great trees of Mamre the Amorite, a brother of Eshcol and Aner, all of whom were allied with Abram. When Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went in pursuit as far as Dan." At least one person escaped the onslaught of the enemy. Abram could have said, "Well, I hope he'll do okay," or I wish him luck. But this isn't the case. Abram gets word about his nephew Lot, and he immediately springs into action. We can certainly get an idea of just how wealthy Abram was at this point in his life. Once he had gotten word from Lot, or about Lot, that he'd been captured, he called together all the trained men in his own household, and they numbered 318. That's quite a great number, don't you think? God had certainly prospered Abram in this land. This group goes on the offensive to get back Lot and his family and their belongings. But they were no doubt going up against thousands of trained soldiers. How could just 318 men face such odds and be successful? Well, let's read on. Verses 15 and 16 says, "During the night, Abram divided his men to attack them, and he routed them, pursuing them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. He recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions, together with the women and the other people." So here they make their battle plans, and they're successful. The Lord blessed Abram and his men in this battle. It tells us a lot about the character of this man of faith. He could have, again, let Lot fend for himself. He could have let him remain a captive instead of forsaking his own safety and going back and getting him. Lot had, after all, caused him at least some degree of grief and trouble when his own shepherds were disagreeing with the shepherds of Abram, and they had had their disagreements. But Abram was not out for vengeance here, but wanted to recover his nephew Lot. The Lord gives Abram and his 318 men success over these captors. He is not only able to free Lot, but he also brings back all the people that were taken, along with all of their possessions. Abram and his 318 men were able to do what, well, the rebel kings could not. Verses 17 through 20 says, "After Abram returned from defeating Kedorlaomer and the kings allied with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, that is, the king's valley. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. And he blessed Abram, saying, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything." we set the scene here. Abram and his army were on their way back home when they ended up meeting up with the king of Sodom as well as the king of Salem. This king of Salem, the Melchizedek, is quite a kind of a mystery to us. He's not only the king of Salem, which would, by the way, become Jerusalem, but he's also priest of God Most High. And I've read that there's basically 5 possibilities to the identity of this mysterious man. First, some say that this was in fact the pre-incarnate Christ, meaning he was Jesus appearing to be a man before he was born in an actual physical body in Bethlehem centuries later. Second, some believe that Melchizedek was an actual historical figure who serves as sort of a type of Christ, meaning he was someone that pointed to the coming of Jesus Christ. He was a shadow of who Jesus would be. Third, some say that he was just a Canaanite priest, a pagan priest of one of their many deities. Fourth, others say that it was Shem. The fourth being quite unlikely, since Shem, of course, was the son of Noah. But we learn a little more about him as we continue to look throughout other passages of scriptures. Melchizedek is mentioned in a couple other places. He is included in one of David's messianic psalms. In Psalm 110, verses 4 through 7, David writes, "The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand. He will crush kings on the day of his wrath. He will judge the nations, heaping on the dead and crushing the rulers of the whole earth. He will drink from a brook beside the way. Therefore he will lift up his head." We also see Melchizedek as we turn to the book of Hebrews. And an extended discussion about him. Let's just read a couple of passages. One is Hebrews 7, verses 1 through 4. It says, "This Melchizedek was king of Salem and priest of the God Most High. He met Abraham returning from the defeat of the kings and blessed him, and Abraham gave him 1/10 of everything. First, his name means king of righteousness. Then also king of Salem means king of peace. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, like the Son of God, he remains a priest forever." Just think how great he was. Even the patriarch of Abraham gave him 1/10 of the plunder. The author of Hebrews will go on to portray Christ as the ultimate high priest in the order of Melchizedek. In other words, the ultimate priest, high priest of all time, the only one that is needed for the rest of time. Hebrews chapter 7, verses 17 through 22 says, "For it is declared you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. The former regulation is set aside because it was weak and useless, for the law made nothing perfect, and a better hope is introduced, by which we draw near to God. It was not without an oath. Others became priests without any oath, but he became a priest with an oath when God said to him, 'The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever.' Because of this oath, Jesus has become the guarantee of a better covenant." So, was Melchizedek the pre-incarnate Christ? I really doubt it. I believe he was just a shadow of what Jesus was to be. He was someone we can look at as only a partial fulfillment of who the promised Messiah, Jesus, would be. After all, he is not only the priest and the king, but he's also the ultimate prophet. Prophet, priest, and king. Genesis 14, verses 21 through 24 says, "The king of Sodom said to Abram, 'Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself.' But Abram said to the king of Sodom, 'I have raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and have taken an oath, that I will accept nothing belonging to you. not even a thread or the thong of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten, and the share that belongs to the men who went with me, to Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them have their share. It seems odd that Abram would refuse some of the spoils of war, but he refuses nonetheless. He was a man of morals, a man of integrity, so he doesn't take anything offered to him by the king of Sodom. He may have done so knowing the reputation of the city and its people. He probably also assumes that there would be some things or strings attached to these gifts. He doesn't want to be indebted in any way to some pagan king. He doesn't accept anything belonging to anyone. This is a great point for us to learn, certainly in life. The gifts of the ungodly often have some pretty deadly strings attached to them. They should be avoided at all cost. Well, thank you for joining me once again for the study of God's Word. Next week we'll be continuing in our study of Genesis. We'll be in Genesis 15 if you want to read ahead. But until we meet again, may God bless you, keep you, and give you peace.